It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. You've probably heard people say Einstein was a genius, but he didn't agree. He once said, "It's not that I'm so smart. I just stay with problems longer, and maybe that's exactly what you've never been taught to do. Because the truth is, you're not broken. You're just exhausted. You wake up with noise in your head, racing through a life that never slows down. You solve, you achieve, you keep going, but deep down, you still feel lost. What if the answer isn't in doing more, but in learning to stay? Einstein wasn't faster. He wasn't superhuman. He just did the one thing most people are too afraid to do. He waited. He listened. He stayed long enough for the truth to emerge, and so can you. This video is for anyone who's tired of running from the questions that keep returning at night. Because the moment you stop running is the moment you start to hear yourself again. So, if something in you whispered yes while I spoke, if a part of you feels seen, even just a little, then stay. There's more waiting here, more quiet truths, more space to breathe again. And if that feels like something you've been missing, then maybe this isn't just a video. Maybe it's a place you return to whenever the world gets loud, whenever you forget how to listen. You wake up, your heart's already racing a little, even before you've left the bed. You reach for your phone, notifications, news, noise. You scroll like you're searching for something, maybe meaning, maybe distraction, but you're not really sure. You just know that stillness feels unbearable. So you move, you get up, you get going. Coffee, work, messages, more messages. It's a blur of tasks and decisions, but somewhere inside, there's this quiet whisper. Something doesn't feel right. You ignore it. You're too busy for that voice. But at night, when the day fades and you're finally alone, when the screens go dark and there's nothing left to click, that feeling comes back. It sits at the edge of your chest. It doesn't shout. It just waits. A question you don't know how to answer. A heaviness you can't explain. You think, what's wrong with me? But maybe that's not the right question. What if nothing is wrong? What if the reason you feel stuck, confused, or hollow isn't because you lack intelligence, or motivation, or purpose, but because you've never been taught how to stay? To stay with the questions, to stay with the discomfort, to stay long. Enough with the ache until it reveals something deeper than pain. Einstein once said, "It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer." And that might be one of the most radical truths of our time. Because today we don't stay. We run. We avoid. We mask pain with busyness. We confuse speed with wisdom, noise with answers, movement with progress. But Einstein, he sat. He let the unknown breathe. He waited while others rushed, and somehow through the stillness, clarity emerged. What if your greatest insights, your deepest healing, your most meaningful breakthroughs are waiting in the one place you've been trained to avoid? Stillness. Not the empty kind, the sacred kind. The kind that says, you're safe now. You don't have to escape yourself anymore. You weren't born afraid of stillness. You didn't come into this world needing to fix, scroll, plan, or escape. When you were a child, you could stare at the ceiling and be fascinated. You could lie on the grass and watch clouds move for hours without guilt, without needing to be somewhere else. You were present, not because someone taught you mindfulness, but because you were alive, undivided, curious, whole. Then, something changed. Little by little, the world taught you to stop listening, to stop feeling, to stop waiting. Maybe it started at school, when questions didn't matter as much as answers, when speed was rewarded and stillness was punished, when being smart meant being the first to finish, when silence in your mind felt like danger, like being left behind, and so we learned. To move faster, to try harder, to fill the spaces between thoughts with noise, with goals, with distractions, and eventually, without even realizing it, we started running not just from boredom, but from ourselves. That's the modern problem. We've made urgency our identity. We live like everything is on fire, especially our inner world. So we run from anything that slows us down. Uncertainty, swipe it away. Emotional pain, numb it with dopamine. A question with no easy answer. Distract. Solve something else. Open a new tab. We are surrounded by tools that promise speed and starving for the one thing that truly heals. Time. Time with the question. Time with the ache. Time with who we are when there's nothing left to perform. But let's be honest. Being still today feels almost impossible, doesn't it? You sit down for just a minute, and your hand reaches for your phone like it has a mind of its own. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired. We've been conditioned to escape discomfort instantly. The modern world has no patience for the unknown. It rewards answers, not questions. Results, not presence. Control, not curiosity. But here's the quiet tragedy hiding behind our speed. The moment you rush past discomfort, you rush past yourself. Think about it. Have you ever had a problem, a real one, that you tried to fix quickly, just so you didn't have to feel it? Maybe a relationship that felt off, but you distracted yourself instead of asking the hard questions. Maybe a job that drained you, but you buried the truth under productivity. Maybe grief that you tried to outrun by staying busy. We've mastered the art of functioning while broken. We've learned how to carry emotional wounds like invisible backpacks, never healing, only managing. Why? Because healing takes presence. And presence takes time. And time, in today's world, feels like a luxury no one can afford. But what if time isn't a luxury? What if it's the medicine? Einstein understood this. He wasn't rushing to be right. He wasn't afraid to sit in the mess of an unanswered question. He let the unknown breathe. He let problems speak. He knew something we've forgotten. That not knowing isn't a failure. It's the beginning of wisdom. Look around. Everyone's solving, optimizing, hustling. And yet, quietly, beneath the surface, so many are lost. Because knowing how to function is not the same as knowing how to feel. And solving problems isn't the same as listening to them. Most people don't solve their real problems. They just move the pain around. They switch jobs. They switch cities. They switch partners. But the ache follows. Because the ache was never out there. It was a teacher asking to be heard. And you can't hear a teacher if you're always talking over them with productivity. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells you in this achievement-obsessed world. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is nothing. Not in the lazy sense, but in the sacred sense. The deeply courageous act of sitting with what hurts, of letting the silence stretch long enough for your deeper voice to speak. Most people never hear that voice, not because it doesn't exist, but because they never slow down long enough to listen. So they live half alive. They run marathons with no finish line. They achieve, perform, succeed, and still feel empty. You might be one of them. Or maybe you're waking up to something, a suspicion that the very thing you've been running from, the confusion, the sadness, the silence, might not be your enemy. It might be your doorway, your turning point, and maybe, just maybe, the problem you've been trying to escape. Isn't there to break you. It's there to remake you. But that can only happen if you stop running, if you slow down, if you do what Einstein did. Stay. Not because it's easy, not because you'll get an answer right away, but because in the quiet, something shifts. The chaos settles. The pain softens. The truth begins to rise. And when it does, it doesn't come like a lightning bolt. It comes like a whisper. and the only way to hear a whisper is to be still long enough to receive it. Einstein wasn't a magician. He didn't have superpowers. He didn't download answers from the universe like some cosmic genius. He waited. He wandered. He wondered. And most of all, he stayed. That was his secret. When others rushed to conclusions, he lingered in the unknown. While the world demanded answers, he made a home inside the question. He once said, "It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer." That one sentence dismantles the myth we've built around intelligence.
We think being smart means knowing more, thinking faster, solving quicker. But Einstein turned all of that on its head. He wasn't racing, he was listening. He had the kind of patience that our modern world has almost forgotten. Kind that
doesn't look productive on the outside, but births entire universes on the inside. Imagine this. You're sitting in a room. There's a problem in front of you. Something complex, maybe even painful. Everyone else glances at it, shrugs, and walks away. But you stay, you stare at it, you let it confuse you. You let it sit in your chest like a knot you don't know how to untie. You don't panic, you breathe. You trust that something will unfold. Not because you force it, but because you've made space for it. That's what Einstein did. He gave his problems oxygen. He didn't attack them. He invited them in. He let them speak, even if they didn't make sense yet. Because he understood something sacred. Answers don't come when you demand them. They come when you're available, when you're humble enough to admit you don't know, and brave enough to stay anyway. That's not just intelligence. That's spiritual maturity. It takes courage to sit in the unknown. It takes strength to say, "I don't have the solution, but I'm not going to run from the question." It takes real wisdom to let things unfold on their own timeline, not yours. In a world obsessed with certainty, Einstein found power in curiosity. He let go of the need to be right, and in doing so, saw deeper than most people ever will. His mind wasn't just filled with facts. It was open, spacious, soft, able to hold contradiction, mystery, silence. Can you imagine living like that, letting your problems breathe instead of trying to strangle them into submission? Letting your confusion exist, not as something to be ashamed of, but as something sacred. Einstein trusted the slow unfolding of truth. He knew that brilliance doesn't explode into your mind. It drips in, quietly, moment by moment, if you're still enough to receive it. And the truth is, that's available to you too. You don't need a higher IQ. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to slow down long enough to listen. The next insight in your life, the one that changes how you see yourself, how you love, how you move through the world, isn't hiding from you. It's waiting in the space you've been afraid to enter, the quiet space, the uncertain space, the sacred space where the answer is still forming. And your only job is to stay long enough for it to arrive. That's not just how Einstein solved scientific problems. It's how he approached life. And maybe that's what we've been missing. All along, you've been taught that answers come from thinking harder, from pushing, analyzing, outsmarting your confusion. But there's a different kind of knowing, one that doesn't scream from the mind, but whispers from the soul. That's what Einstein understood, not just intellectually, but intuitively. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a mystic in disguise. He didn't worship knowledge, he honored mystery, and that makes all the difference. Because at some point, raw intelligence reaches a wall, and after that, you either surrender to something deeper, or you spend your life banging on that wall, begging for logic to save you. But some truths can't be solved. They can only be lived, felt, trusted. There's a point where the mind must bow to something greater. And that's not weakness. That's wisdom. You see, what Einstein called staying with the problem, mystics call sitting with the unknown. Therapists call it emotional regulation. Monks call it contemplation. And in every tradition, it points to the same door, the strength to wait without needing to escape, the courage to feel without needing to fix, the maturity to let life unfold, even when you don't understand it yet. That's what we're really talking about, because problems, the real ones, they're not math equations. They're not puzzles to be conquered. They're invitations. Every emotional wound, every confusion, every ache you carry, it's not just pain. It's a portal, a place in your being asking for presence. Not solutions, not escape, presence. And presence means this: you stop trying to fix the moment, and you start listening to it. Most people never do that. They don't know how. They've been taught to label their emotions as good or bad, to chase the highs and numb the lows, to see discomfort as failure, instead of seeing it as a compass. But discomfort, emotional, spiritual, even physical, is often the signal that something sacred is knocking. Not to punish you, but to awaken you. Because here's a truth you may not want to hear, but need to. The pain you avoid the longest is usually the doorway to the freedom you seek. Einstein stayed, not because it felt good, but because he understood what most people don't. That truth isn't something you capture. It's something you become quiet enough to hear. He gave problems time to breathe. He allowed the chaos to speak its language. And eventually, in that stillness, the answer: rise. You can apply this exact same principle to your emotional life. When you feel lost, don't rush to find meaning. Sit with the lostness, let it speak. Ask it what it wants to teach you. When you feel afraid, don't just bury it under productivity. Be with the fear. Breathe into it. Watch how it softens when it's seen. When you feel sad, don't cover it up with distraction. Give the sadness a place at the table. Treat it like a guest who traveled a long way just to deliver a message. This is emotional intelligence at its highest form. Not the ability to control feelings, but the ability to sit with them, understand them, and learn their language. And this is what Einstein modeled, without ever using spiritual language. He showed us that staying is sacred, that discomfort is not the enemy of truth, it's the birthplace of it. He stayed with his confusion. You can stay with your grief. He stayed with a question. You can stay with your healing. He stayed with tension. You can stay with that part of yourself you've been running from for years. What happens when you stop trying to change your emotional state and just honor it? Something shifts. Slowly, yes. Quietly, yes, but powerfully. You realize that the fear didn't want to dominate you. It wanted your presence. The sadness didn't want to consume you. It wanted your softness. The anxiety didn't want to destroy you. It wanted you to listen to what you've been ignoring. In the silence, the emotions begin to unfold. Not as enemies, but as guides. Not as problems, but as messengers. Each one holding a key. Each one pointing you not away from yourself, but back home. And it's in that space, the space Einstein lived in, that transformation begins. Not because you figured it all out, but because you stopped needing to. Not because you got stronger, but because you got still. You didn't climb the mountain. You let the fog lift, and in that moment, something ancient and sacred happens. You remember that clarity doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it arrives like morning light, soft, quiet, unforced. That's what Einstein knew. That's what mystics knew. And deep down, that's what you know too. But to access that knowing, you must be willing to do the rarest thing in the modern world. Wait, not as a punishment, but as a prayer, not as a delay, but as devotion. So what does this look like for you? Because right now, all of this might feel beautiful but distant, philosophical, poetic, abstract. And that's okay. But transformation doesn't come from knowing. It comes from living differently, even in the smallest of ways. You don't need to change your entire life. You don't need to quit your job, go live in a forest, or meditate on a mountain. You just need to try something different, right? Where you are, it begins here. Choose one problem in your life right now. Not the biggest, not the most dramatic, just one question that makes you uncomfortable. One emotion you've been trying to avoid, something that tugs at your chest when the world gets quiet. Now, instead of rushing to solve it, instead of distracting yourself or burying it under productivity, what if you gave it 5 minutes a day? Just 5. 5 minutes where you stop pretending you know what to do. 5 minutes where you stop fighting, fixing, thinking. 5 minutes where you simply sit with it. That's the practice. It sounds small. It's not. Because what you're doing in those 5 minutes isn't passive. It's radical. It's the undoing of a lifetime of running. It's saying, I'm not afraid to be with myself anymore. And that changes everything. Find a quiet space. Set a timer if you must. Close your eyes. Let your body soften. Breathe. And let the problem rise. You don't need to name it. You don't need to fix it. Just witness it, as if you were watching a storm pass over the ocean. It's there, yes. It's loud, maybe, but you are not the storm. You are the sky. This practice, this gentle, sacred act of staying, begins to shift something deep within. Your nervous system, once wired for urgency, begins to trust stillness. Your heart, once closed from fear, starts to feel safe enough to open. And in that space, the answers that used to hide begin to emerge. Not forced, not loud, just revealed. Some days, nothing will happen. No insight, no breakthrough. Just you, sitting with your discomfort. But that too is transformation. Because staying with yourself, even when there's no reward, is the definition of love. And slowly, without realizing it, something inside begins to change. The need to escape softens. The noise quiets. And a kind of inner spaciousness opens, the kind you forgot was possible. That's when wisdom speaks, not with fireworks, but with clarity, a gentle knowing, a subtle shift, a breath where there used to be panic, a softness where there used to be armor. This is the beginning of real strength, not the strength to fight your emotions, but the strength to feel them and still stay. So this week, I invite you to stay. 5 minutes a day, not because it's easy, not because it will change your life overnight, but because your soul deserves your presence. And the problems you carry, the ones that whisper to you in the quiet, they don't want to be fixed. They want to be felt. They want to be understood. And most of all, they want to be seen without fear. Einstein stayed with the problem. You can stay with yourself. You can meet your pain not as a threat, but as a teacher. You can begin, right? Now to reclaim the one thing this world has tried to take from you. Your capacity to be with your own experience, without turning away. That's how healing begins. That's how wisdom grows. That's how clarity is born, not from running faster, but from finally stopping and listening. Maybe no one ever taught you how to do this, how to sit with a question without panicking, how to feel something painful without fixing it, how to stay with a storm until it passes on its own. Maybe you were taught to rush, to achieve, to outperform your confusion, to silence your doubts with solutions, to be strong by staying busy, not by being present. But now, you know something different. You know that staying is strength. That silence is not empty, it's where your truth lives. That your most persistent problems may not need a smarter you. They need a slower, softer, more patient you. This is the wisdom Einstein lived. It's quiet. It's invisible to the outside world. But it changes everything from the inside out. When you stop rushing toward the answer, when you stop running from the ache, you become available. Available to hear what your deeper self has been trying to say for years. And sometimes that voice says something simple like, "Thank you for finally listening. I've been here, waiting, the whole time. You don't have to fix me. You just have to stay. This is the work of a lifetime. To stay present in a world addicted to escape. To be intimate with your inner world, even when it scares you. To treat your pain not as a flaw, but as a guide. It's not glamorous. It's not fast, but it's real. And it's yours, because you can read 1,000 books, chase 1,000 goals, change your environment 100 times. But if you never learn how to sit with yourself, you'll always feel like something's missing. Not because something is missing, but because you've never truly landed inside your own life. So maybe that's where your journey begins now. Not with a leap, but with a return. A return to stillness.
A return to presence. A return to the wisdom you carry beneath all the noise. Einstein found his answers not by being faster than everyone else, but by staying longer. And the same is possible for you. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing, to remain, to sit in the silence, to feel what arises. To let truth unfold on its own terms. And if you do, if you choose to stay, you will begin to notice something beautiful. That the very problem you thought would break you was never here to destroy you. It was here to open you, to wake you up, to bring you home. So take a breath and ask yourself, what if I stopped trying to escape what hurts and just stayed with it gently? What would shift? What part of you might begin to heal, not because you forced it, but because you finally gave it permission? Because here's the truth, whispered softly and without pressure. When you stop chasing what you don't need, what you truly want begins to find you. And it doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with stillness, with softness, with clarity that has been there all along, waiting for you to slow down enough to feel it. So today I'll leave you with this. Don't try to fix yourself. Don't rush toward the next breakthrough. Just stay. Stay with the question. Stay with the ache. Stay with the part of you that doesn't know what to do next. Because sometimes, staying is the smartest thing you'll ever do. Now I want to ask you something. What's one problem, one emotion, one question you're willing to stay with this week? Comment below. Let it out of your head. Give it a voice. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize you're not as alone as you thought. If this message resonated with you, if you're tired of rushing and ready to live with more depth, then pause, breathe, subscribe, and keep walking this path of stillness and truth. We're just getting started.